Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
A good Thursday morning, one and all. It's 8:06 here on O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in. It's Larry O'Connor with Mercedes Schlapp. And, of course, Mercedes, it's a unique day as we sort of set our regular programming to cover this breaking, developing, tragic story right here in our backyard in the Potomac River. The recovery operation is underway now after the tragic mid-air collision at Reagan Airport. An American Airlines commercial flight carrying 60 passengers and 4 crew members. As it was landing from Wichita, Kansas, there was a collision. A Army Black Hawk helicopter from Fort Belvoir carrying 3 soldiers, 3 crew members, collided with that plane on approach. A lot of questions, obviously, about what went wrong here, what happened, and there's time for all those questions and answers. One thing we do know now is that upwards to 30 bodies have been recovered as this operation now continues. That's been going through the night in frigid temperatures in that freezing Potomac.
And they are saying that the water conditions are bad. Obviously, you were talking about the conditions there as well. And the officials saying we are now moving from a rescue operation to a recovery operation. No believed survivors. Just it's so incredibly tragic here right in our backyard.
Yeah. And let's face it, I mean, if you see the videos, and we have been able to see some videos from security cameras, one specifically on the roof of the Kennedy Center, with that kind of fireball that you see in the explosion, I don't think anybody made it alive into the water, to tell you the truth. This was just such a devastating impact. And we're going to continue. We just had at a press conference at Reagan National, headed up by all the local officials, including the mayor of D.C. and the Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy. We'll reiterate everything that we've learned and anything else that happens this hour. We also want to turn to our friend, Katie McFarland, former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Trump. And you know, few people have worked closely and right there, shoulder to shoulder, with multiple U.S. presidents. Katie McFarland is one of those people. And I think I want to start, KT, in our conversation to sort of, in a broader sense, moments like this. Here, President Trump, obviously this is his second term. He has been president before, but he's less than 2 weeks into this term. And it's moments like this can actually define a president. All eyes are on Washington, D.C., not just because the crash happened right here, but you turn to the commander-in-chief, you turn to the president of the United States in moments like this. I'd love for you to sort of reflect on this and what you know about Donald Trump, sort of filling the shoes of the commander-in-chief at a moment like this.
You know, the important thing that a lot of people don't think about when they think about a president is that indefinable sense of leadership. You know, they think, well, these are the policies, here's his personalities, these are the top picks for his big jobs, this is the agenda. But they don't think of him in that sort of mourner-in-chief role. I'm thinking, you know, everyone uses that example of Reagan when the entire country was watching a space launch. Yeah. And in our eyes, the thing blew up. And what was that? Did it really happen? Wasn't like a video game. And President Reagan, within moments, you know, within not much time, went out and talked about the glory of it. Not the mourning of it, and isn't this a great tragedy? Yes, it was a great tragedy. But it was also a moment where he said these people were reaching for the stars. And Peggy Noonan wrote the speech, came together in, you know, literally less than hours. And President Reagan was able to take that grief and channel it into something bigger and better and a sense of purpose for the nation. I also think back to the moment that President Reagan, when he went to Arlington Cemetery, it was on Memorial Day, and it was a beautiful sunny day. I wrote the speech because I was the Pentagon's chief speechwriter at the time. And he talked about, you know, the sacrifice of our men and women. But he, for the first time, a president had talked about Vietnam. You know, we forget, and the younger people have never even remembered, but the Vietnam War was the third rail of American politics. Nobody wanted to talk about it. We lost. It's a terrible experience for America. Right. And so most political leaders just talked about something else. And Reagan took it and went to that memorial service And he gave a speech, and I was right in the front row, and I was looking around. I was so proud. I was a young speechwriter. These were my words being uttered by the president, and I was all about me. And then when Reagan started talking, I looked around at the other people at Arlington, and there were a lot of Vietnam vets, and they were, in wheelchairs. They looked like they had been living rough. They were not, they were people who had really suffered from war, personally suffered from war, and had not yet recovered. And Reagan talked about the service they gave to the country. He didn't talk about Vietnam was right or it was wrong or we lost, we should have done this, we should have done that. He just honored them for their service to the nation. And it was such a healing moment, not just for the nation, but particularly for those people. Later, after Reagan left, the speech was in the morning. He got on a plane and flew to the Air Force Academy, where he gave the commencement address. It was the first class of graduating women. It was an exciting time. And having gone from being the more sort of mourner-in-chief and consoler-in-chief, he went to the Air Force Academy and gave a speech which was spectacular about you are the leaders of the generation. Only Reagan could go, and that to me is that indescribable quality of a president. We'll see what President Trump, I know him. He takes these things very seriously. He's fiercely protective of people, particularly people in the service, particularly the innocents, as the people on the plane were all. And I really hope he does rise to the occasion. I think he will. But that's the moment that, as you say, it defines the president. Yeah. You see his character, and then it makes you, if you love him and you love the character that he's showing and his love for the nation, you kind of love the nation yourself. It's important.
Well said. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. We're looking at a couple of important confirmation hearings happening on the Hill today. One, Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence. She'll be at the Senate Intelligence Committee. And then Kash Patel at the Senate Judiciary Committee. That's set for today. How do you think that these confirmation hearings are going to go, KT?
Well, the firepower of the defense industrial complex will be leveled at Tulsi Gabbard, the same people who tried to sabotage Pete Hegseth. And why? Because he's not business as usual. When I look at Tulsi, take the policy issues aside, and the senators should talk about those things, and she should have answers to their questions. But I look at her, and I know her, and she's a friend, but I look at the sort of three qualities that she has that are so important right now. America doesn't have any faith in its government, particularly doesn't have faith in its intelligence services. We had the 51 spies who lied, the 51 former senior intelligence agents who tried to throw the American election by saying that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation, and it probably affected a lot of voters in the 2020 election. Or you think about the lawfare and the overreach of the two-tier system of justice. You go on and on and on and on about how we were lied to, we were gaslighted, we were persecuted and prosecuted if we didn't toe the Biden far-left Democrat line. And I just think of Tulsi as somebody who's, like Pete Hegseth, has the ability to restore our confidence, and for a couple of reasons. One, and this to me was so stunning. She's a Democrat from far Democrat Hawaii, far left Hawaii. She goes to Congress, doesn't like the direction, this very far left direction that the Democrats were swinging in, and so she used her position as a congresswoman to speak out against that leftward trend. And, doesn't get a lot of traction in Congress. So then she stands up and runs for president in the Democrat primary. She knew that she was going to just get beaten up every time she went up on that debate stage. But she had the guts and the sort of personal integrity to stand up there and take it because she wanted to offer her fellow Democrats an alternative. And then after that, and Mercedes, you were there. I can't remember, Larry, if you were, but Mercedes, I remember sitting with you at the CPAC conference convention 2 years ago. And it was a very controversial decision that you and Matt Schlapp made to invite her to be the keynote speaker at the Reagan dinner, but you did. And Tulsi walks into thousands of people, like the leading conservatives in the world, social conservatives, fiscal conservatives, defense conservatives, isolationists, libertarians, all the people who've never even dreamed of voting for a Democrat, much less welcoming a Democrat to talk to them. And she walked in, modest applause as she walked up to the podium. And then she hit it out of the park. She gave a very impassioned and well-reasoned remarks about the Constitution and overreach of the federal government and about elites and the people. She talked about the Constitution and the amendments. She talked about Lincoln. She talked about the Founding Fathers. And I'm sitting there thinking, wow, this is the kind of thing I used to hear at Oxford University from my political philosophy professors. And then there was thunderous applause when she finished, and everybody said, wow, that's a Democrat. We'd love one of those. And so that took an enormous amount of courage to walk into a room with thousands of people who didn't like you and then make your case and then walk out to cheers. So I think those are the kind of qualities we want.
It was, it's great, and I can't wait to see her in the hearing today, KT. It was such a great speech, Mercedes, that KT completely forgets that I was the MC of that dinner that night.
I was trying to remember if you were the MC.
Tulsi overshadowed you, Larry.
It's the sign of a good MC that I elevate everybody else on the stage.
Exactly.
That's true.
Yes.
I do remember a lot of laughs,
KT.
but there were not a lot of laughs when she spoke, and the laughs were your laughs.
No. Exactly. I said Tulsi Gabbard's here to make the conservative case for socialized medicine. It was great. KT, thank you for joining us. I appreciate you being here as always on a very important day here.
Thank you.
It is 8:18. I thought I would really good that night. KT couldn't remember that I was there.
It's okay, Larry. Don't take it personally.
Jane, I did. How now?
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live
from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Cut 38 here, if we could. This is the CEO of American Airlines, Robert Isom. This is about 40 minutes ago at the press conference at Reagan National, giving the latest and what he knows about what occurred in last night's mid-air collision over the Potomac. Take a listen.
Here's what I can share at this early stage. American Eagle Flight 5342, operated by PSA Airlines, traveling from Wichita, Kansas to Reagan National Airport, was involved in an accident just before 9 p.m. local time on final approach into Reagan National. It collided with a military aircraft on an otherwise normal approach. And at this time, we don't know why the military aircraft came into the path of the PSA aircraft. Flight 5342, a CRJ 700, was under the command of 4 crew members. They carried 60 passengers, as you know, for a total of 64 people on board. In addition to local resources already here in D.C., American Airlines has activated our care team, and that's a group of specialists that are trained to support these types of responses. These team members are on site or arriving soon. And additionally, we have members of our GO team that are on ground here in D.C., and they're being deployed with resources to do everything that we can to take care of the needs of the families and the loved ones of the passengers and crew members.
Okay, and actually, just about 10 minutes ago, we had a little bit more from Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy as he answered a couple of questions. We're going to deliver that to you in just a moment, but I do want to go, if I could, Michael Shelton, to cut 34, if I could. You'll find this in the cut sheet from 7C. You got it. This is cut 34. This is CNN's aviation expert Pete Muntean. This is last night, but a good analysis of what we knew at the time and what we continue to know based on what we just heard confirmed from the CEO of American Airlines. Go ahead.
Clearly, Abby, will be a tragedy that will change aviation. Mark my words now. You are looking now at the incredible response there on the shores of the Potomac River. That is the scene apparently from the air looking eastbound toward Reagan National Airport. You can see the terminal and gates in the background. In the foreground there, you can see all of the police crash fire rescue response on the banks of the Potomac. This is really staggering that this has happened, and there have been close call after close call involving commercial flights on the runways of commercial airports, major airports in the U.S., a spate of incidents that really took off in 2023. None of them ending up occurring with a midair collision like we have seen here. The fact that this involved not only a commercial flight, which is equipped from top to bottom with anti-collision technology, something called TCAS, Traffic Collision Avoidance System, mandated by the FAA in most commercial airliners since the early 90s, but also the pilots are well trained. The aviation system, commercial aviation in the U.S., is the gold standard for safety. We are the example for every other country. There has not been a significant crash with fatalities, and we do not know if there are fatalities here, in the U.S. involving a commercial flight since the Colgan Air crash of 2009. Led to sweeping changes in regulation and pilot experience requirements. The fact that this happened in D.C., over near Reagan National Airport, some of the busiest airspace in the country and one of the single busiest runways in the national airspace system, is really pretty incredible.
Yeah, and again, that was last night. We have now confirmed that there are no survivors at all, but everything else that you heard there, yes, absolutely accurate. This is going to change things. We have had near misses, but sadly now those near misses have now led to this horrific event, and there needs to be some major scrutiny. I think that goes without saying.
Now
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
Last night, the president had said that this could be prevented, and also that air traffic control, questioning why they may not have communicated with the helicopter, telling them what to do.
We are going to wait for all the information to come in from this vantage point, but to back up what the president said, what I've seen so far, do I think this was preventable? Absolutely.
That's Sean Duffy, Transportation Secretary, asked about President Trump's tweet that this could have been prevented. Why is that even controversial? Of course it could have been prevented.
Yeah.
The air traffic happens all the time at Reagan Airport. It is prevented every day, but in this case it was not prevented.
Well,
but
I would have probably stuck to the line of just, let's get through the investigation and let's, figure out how we can solve the problem. I think that's where they need to stay right now. I think that's the smartest approach right now.
But if you're going to say this was preventable, there's nothing that's not controversial.
You would want it to be
of course, it was preventable. We prevent these things from happening every day.
Yes.
Joining us right now to discuss this is an Army Special Forces veteran who's been inside a Black Hawk or two in his life. He's president of World Strat and led U.S. Army counterterrorism operations. He is Jim Hanson, good friend of the program. By the way, I'll also say Jim Hanson has a pretty good vantage point of the Potomac, and I dare say you see these helicopters going up and down the Potomac on a daily basis, Jim.
Yeah, I mean, Larry, you've been to the house. We live a mile from Reagan National, and I mean, every night I sit in bed reading, and we watch the planes leaving northbound. A couple hundred feet off the ground. It's horrifying to think this happened right down the hill.
Do you have any insight as to what kind of we're getting mixed reports, as is typical from the military on this? We were first told that there was a VIP on this helicopter. Then we were told this was a training mission. There seems to be some confusion about what purpose the helicopter had at that time in that space, and whether it was flying with all the appropriate notifications for commercial jets. Can you lend some insight into what this could possibly be?
Yeah, I think they have said there were 3 on board the Black Hawk, which would be a pilot, co-pilot, and a crew chief. So it seems unlikely, if that's the case, that there was anyone, a VIP or anyone else on there. As far as a training mission, it makes sense. That's a very normal thing. I want to clarify that military training missions don't imply that this was a student pilot or a less experienced pilot. Could have been potentially the most experienced folks they had in that unit, because the military requires training missions on a regular basis to maintain proficiency. If you're a parachutist, you jump out of planes regularly. If you're a pilot, you fly a helicopter or a plane. So they would have been doing it. It would be normal for them to be flying a mission profile similar to taking a VIP somewhere, if that's that's the unit's mission.
I see.
So the question is, how did they end up in the exact airspace that is the approach to the runway 33 at Reagan? and that it was either pilot error, air traffic error, or a technical malfunction, and we have no way of knowing yet which it was.
What do you think could come from these investigations that, the Pentagon is launching? Obviously, you're saying, I think you'll see a congressional investigation, and what the Secretary of Transportation has also said. I know he mentioned that this was preventable, but it just seems, based on what we've heard in the audio so far, that there it almost seems like a miscommunication where he's like, do you see the plane? And there's like two planes, one departing, one landing. I don't know. It's just, there's, I think, the concern of what's happening with the air traffic controllers.
Yeah, I've listened to the audio, and the air traffic controller did not sound overly concerned or distraught, as if he was waving him off and aware that there was a potential collision happening, which seems strange if they know the two planes, the two aircraft were that close together at that point in time. Mm-hmm. But that's part of his job, is to maintain that level of control and professionalism. But at some level, it appears the aircraft, the jet was supposed to be there. It does not appear the helicopter was likely supposed to be in that exact spot. And the question then becomes, did they become disoriented? Did they have an instrument problem that led them to believe they were elsewhere? And then at that point, how are we supposed to look at the collision avoidance gear on both aircraft is malfunctioning? There's so many things have to go wrong for this to happen, and yet last night they did.
Speaking with Jim Hanson, who is a retired U.S. Army Special Forces dude. And Jim, we've had you on in the past talk about the issues with regard to recruitment and morale and focus from the United States military. You've expressed grave concerns in the past. Pete Hegseth has been on the job for a little over 48 hours now, and I wonder if your vast number of contacts within the military have expressed to you their opinion about their new leader.
What a breath of fresh air, Larry. I can't even begin to tell you. Everybody I know, and I think this is kind of all of the political and conservative right as a whole, but especially the military was beat down. It was used as a social engineering laboratory, for woke ideology, and they broke it as a war-fighting force and, more importantly, as a deterrent to war and a deterrent to tyranny around the world. And there is no doubt that Pete Hegseth is changing that already just by being nominated, confirmed, and going in the building and doing what he does. It's amazing.
You expect recruitment numbers to have a swift turnaround?
I don't doubt that for a second. It's a question of everybody who's got a young person in their life considering joining the military for the past few years. And my niece, my brother's daughter, joined the Army last year and graduated basic training. And I had to go through this with her and explain to her, there are things about the military right now I don't like that concern me. Be aware of that. But now I could wholeheartedly recommend to anyone, join the military. It's going to go back to what it should be, the premier fighting force on the planet.
Jim Hanson, follow him on the X platform, Jim Hanson, D.C. Thanks, Jim, for getting on here in a moment's notice and giving us some insight. I appreciate it very much, sir.
Good to be with you.
It is 8:44. I want you
The WMAL Free Speech Forum, the first 100 days, Sunday, April 27th at the Birchmere. Details at WMAL.com.
Let's update you on what we know here. Again, a mid-air collision last night over Reagan Airport. American Airlines flight coming in from Wichita, Kansas, on its approach to the runway over the Potomac was struck by a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter out of Fort Belvoir. The collision created a fireball in the air. Both aircraft plunged into the Potomac. There was a frantic overnight search and rescue operation in the frigid water. The water was just at the freezing level all night long. In the dark, obviously, you can imagine a horrific and incredibly challenging scene by those brave fire and EMS responders. Just about an hour ago, Washington Fire and EMS Chief John Donnelly at the press conference confirmed what we all feared. If we could, Michael, cut 36 here. Cut 36, please. Thank you.
Despite all those efforts, we are now at a point where we are switching from a rescue operation to a recovery operation. At this point, we don't believe there are any survivors from this accident, and we have recovered 27 people from the plane and 1 from the helicopter. The district office of the medical examiner has lead on reuniting these bodies and these people with their loved ones, and we will continue to work to find all the bodies and collect them and reunite them with their loved ones. We should also acknowledge that the Virginia medical examiner and the Army medical examiner are involved in this operation and a very important part of getting people identified.
We've also learned, Mercedes, that on that aircraft, tragically, were members of the USA figure skating team, or at least the up-and-coming skaters. They were in Wichita, Kansas, where the national championships were taking place. Just a horrible story all around. Including 2 Russian figure skaters who, have won championships. Just very tragic to listen to this and trying to sort it all out, right? Like trying to figure out, which is going to be part of this investigation process of what really happened. Was it the helicopters, those individuals who were in the helicopter who made that terrible mistake? Was it the air traffic controllers? There's a lot we still need to learn before, making any sort of, really providing any sort of specific analysis. Mm-hmm. One thing we do know, that commercial airliner out of Wichita was carrying 60 passengers and 4 crew members. They've all perished. And the Army Black Hawk helicopter was carrying 3 soldiers. They have perished. And our prayers are for them and for their family on this horrible day in your nation's capital. It's 8:52. Mercedes, thanks for being here today on a tough one, but I'm glad you were here with me. Have a good day today. Yes, just please pray for all those families. It's such a hard time, I think, for so many of these individuals out there. It sure is. 100%. Hey, Chris Plant, how are you holding up today?
Hey, good morning. Good morning. A terrible tragedy, of course, happened locally. Last night at home, looking out our window, we from our place, my best girl saw this flash of light